Right. So, because I'm going to share my screen, and then if y'all can let me know, what I'm going to want to know is, do you see a contract to buy and sell real estate on there? If someone could just say yes, that'll make me know that we're good.
Yes.
Awesome. Cool. So I'm going to do this in this editable format. I pulled this from CTM. For those of you that don't use CTM, I think you're crazy. I think it's the best software we have for it, but that's just my opinion. So, all right, so start at the top, guys. We have to let the public know where we work out of, right? If you upset somebody, they've got to know who to go and complain to about, right? So I have a team. My team is called Herd Group Denver. The top of my contract does not say Herd Group Denver. It is not a brokerage. You must have your brokerage up here. It's really nice just to use the logo, but keep this in mind. It has to be Keller Williams Realty Downtown, comma, LLC. That LLC may seem silly, but actually is very important. There was an agent that I know that did not put that on his signs once, and he got popped with a little fine. No one wants to get fined, so please make sure you have the right brokerage on there and use the LLC. As we go down, this box right here, what that's telling you is if the contract has been approved or not approved by the Real Estate Commission. Well, the contract to buy and sell real estate has been approved. And because we do use a few forms, like our COVID addendum, that buyer COVID addendum has not been approved. It'll always disclose that up here. And then it's going to tell you when we started using the form. So this one actually came in July of 19, which generally they only changed the real estate contract in January. The reason this came about in July, and you'll see further down, is we changed the statute, and by we, I mean the state of Colorado, on how deeds were prepared. So there's a little change that was done in that summer. There will be changes. The Real Estate Commission only updates the contract every 3 years. However, it was 19, so 2022 is the next contract. And if you guys were on Damien's update class, he did allude that there will be substantial changes next year. So with that in mind, be prepared for this to go from 18 pages to who knows how many. Helen.
You're just a flame. Bob doesn't love you.
Hey, Helen, can you mute yourself? There we go. All right, so going on down, they just give you a nice disclosure in the very middle. This form has important consequences, right? Legal and tax. They do say what kind of contract it is right here. The date you're going to put in here is the date that you write the contract, right? So if I'm writing it, submitting it today, that's the date you're going to put in there. As you go down, you put name of the buyer into the contract. And with that in mind, I'm actually going to go to a different view because this is not how it would look in a real contract. So I'll pull it up in just a second, but the buyer will actually go in lower. But if you're doing it in CTM, they have like these boxes right here, right? So the buyer would go here. I'm sorry, I was thinking about buyer agency. That's why I got confused. I do apologize. So the buyer's name is going to go in here. Make sure that the buyer's name is the way it's going to be for the loan because they need to match up. You should know this by now because you should be in buyer agency. You should have seen a pre-approval letter. I generally just copy their name off the pre-approval letter and do it that way, okay? So any of the buyers on there, if it is a company or a trust, make sure you put that name in as well as their title. Going down to here, this is probably the first thing that gets to me to be somewhat important. How are we going to take title on a house? Does anyone want to take a shot at what the 3 different types of title that we take in general are and what the differences are? Nope. All right. I'll just tell you. If it is a single buyer, right, someone buying it themselves, you can actually leave it alone and do nothing here. You don't have to put anything in because it will default to just the one person on the contract, and they own it in what we call severalty. They're the only owner of the property, okay? So with that in mind, you can put nothing. However, one of the agents on my team did that the other day, and the agent on the other side said, whoa, you messed this up. Most agents expect you to put in there the word severalty. So with that in mind, even though it's not needed, I still put it in with the solo buyer because I don't want to get countered or the other agents and think, oh, he must have messed up. This is technically, you don't have to have it, but we do put it in there. Now, joint tenants and tenants in common, that's when we have more than one person. So joint tenants are what we generally see for a married couple because it has what we call right of survivorship. So if my wife and I go buy a house and we're joint tenants, I die, now she's still alive, she automatically gets my portion of the house. There's no going through probate and all the expenses and stress of that. Instead, it just automatically goes to her. And I don't own 50% and she owns 50%. We just own it wholly. There's no delineation of who owns what percentage in joint tenants. Now, in tenants in common, let's say that me and my buddy Derek wanted to buy an investment property together, but maybe I'm putting less money in than Derek. So maybe Derek's going to own 60% and I only own 40%, or it could be 50-50. We can delineate any ownership we want in tenants in common. I might only own 1%, right? However, if I were to die and Derek's still alive, Derek doesn't get my portion. It goes whatever way I have left my estate. So it doesn't have the right of survivorship for your partner. So with that, we usually see tenants in common in two major scenarios. One, investors. You have investor partners. We see that a lot. The other place we see it a lot is older people that are maybe on their second or third marriage, right? And maybe they're protecting their assets for their younger children when they die. So we'll see that, with an older couple on a second or third marriage. That's about the only time I see a married couple do it, is if it's second and third marriages. Otherwise, usually tenants in common we will just see for those investors. So going on down, guys, our contract is not automatically assignable. What that means is, like, I have an investor that's buying a property and he wants to put it into an LLC name, not his own name. So once we went under contract, he wanted to change it from his name into the LLC. So he wanted to assign the contract to somebody else. It's not automatic. If you want to do that, you have to put it into additional provisions. The contract does not allow for it. When you put the seller's name in, y'all, in 2.3, make sure you're putting the right name. If it's an estate sale, if you see that in the MLS, look and see what's in the private remarks on it. Call the other agent and ask them, say, hey, who's the, how should I phrase this? Who's the signer? How does that look? So if it's anything weird, make sure you're getting the right seller. Usually it'll pull in from CTM, but if it's not, check county records, but it's the estate sales where you really want to make sure you have the right signer on there. All right, the next thing that we really fill out is stuff about the property, right? And I'm going to stop real quick. You see how property is black? The first letter is capitalized. The whole word is bold, right? Big, big word, right? Why do they do that? It's because they're defining a term. So you might see seller as well, right? Here's where we defined what seller is, right? There could be a seller of a car. There could be a seller of a house. But when we define in 2.3 that John Smith is the seller, we've defined seller for this contract as John Smith. But when you do John Smith's name later in the contract, if you're going to say refer to the contract or refer to the seller while in contract, it has to be a capital S and then the rest, right? It can't just be seller with a lowercase s, because if it has a lowercase s, it doesn't necessarily mean the seller for this contract. So that's why we see the word property. So if later I write an additional provision, I say the property shall be cleaned prior to closing, it's property with a capital P, right? It's this property, not that property. So that's what we're defining. So that's when you see these bold words, the capital letter, we're defining a term. So we're defining the property. How do we define a property? Well, I usually define my house by my mailing address, right? That's what we do right here. That's good, but y'all know that mailing addresses do not transfer property. It's just really a reference point. That's all it really is. In fact, creating a new mailing address, if you were to have like add like a ADU to your house and have like a new place, a new mailing address is pretty easy to do. What's bigger though is this box here. This is where we put the legal description. So legal descriptions are what actually transfer the property. So your mailing address, not so important. This legal description, super important. A few notes on legal descriptions. The best place to get them is the county. So when you're writing an offer, if you want to be the most accurate possible, you have to go to the county to get this legal description. I will tell you guys this. I pull it from Realist most times. I haven't had an issue yet, but I know that Realist can be inaccurate. So if you want to be 100% accurate, you put your legal description in from the county. If you want to roll the dice, put it in from Realist. It's up to you. So 2.5 starts to talk about things beyond just the house. What's being included with the house, right? It's not just the actual home. So if you look at 2.5 and 2.52, there are a lot of things that are just automatically included, right? And some of it makes so much sense. Like, for example, plumbing, like who's going to take the pipes out, right? Any of these different things in here, like floor coverings, I'm going to take the carpet with me, I don't know, or the sprinkler system with me, I don't know. So all these kind of things are already included, right? And then and I'm going to skip this part and come right back where it talks about these leased items. And then in 2.5.2, and these ones in 2.1, they're attached to the house. I've always heard that an inclusion is if you take the house and you pulled it off the ground, turned it upside down, shook it, the inclusions are whatever stay on the house, right? Well, that's not 100% true, because in 2.5.2, it's also inclusions that are not attached. So there's a whole list in here, right? If they love the window coverings and the treatments and even just the rod that it's on, well, you better exclude it because it's automatically included. Or for example, if you ever saw a really high-end house with a beautiful fireplace and maybe this beautiful like metal screen in front of it, and like maybe it has like their initials on it, it's like gorgeous, you might want to ask them, hey, do you want to take that with you? Because right here, that's automatically included in your contract, right? So a few little things like that, right? So just keep in mind what you're including, not including. For example, storage sheds, they're already there, okay? So you can write that in, you don't have to, but it's already there. 2.5.3, title does not want you to put personal property here. The reason is it says that it's free and clear of all liens, or they're saying this personal property could have a lien. So with that in mind, title doesn't want anything with liens, right? Now as a lender. So what we do is we put our inclusions here because it doesn't talk about it not having a lien on it. So if you look in 2.5.3, it says any personal property must be conveyed by the seller free and clear of all taxes, liens, and encumbrances except. So maybe I have a house that I'm selling a house and my TV is through Rent-A-Center and I'm going to convey the TV over. I don't know if Rent-A-Center allows that or not, but if they did, my TV's not free of liens, right? So that's personal property I'm conveying that has a lien on it. Now, most people's refrigerators and TVs, the only lien that they technically have, I guess, would be your credit card if you haven't paid it off. But otherwise, there's no real liens on it. So they're going to go in 2.5.4. Does that make sense, guys? Because that one always kind of threw me off. Cool. Going on down. This little box right here is kind of hidden right here. This section right here, it says, if this box is checked, the buyer and seller have agreed to go into a separate agreement for additional personal property. So when do we use this, right? And how do we avoid loan fraud with this, right? Well, let's just say I put a house under contract. It's got a hot tub in the backyard, right? And I put that in as a normal inclusion in 2.5.4. And then we submit the contract to the lender, and the lender says, we're not loaning on the hot tub because most lenders won't loan on it. So they want it pulled out of the contract. So now we do an amend extend. We take that out of the contract, right? So it's no longer here. And instead we say, we'll check this box and do it in a separate agreement. So we've taken the hot tub out. We've put it into what we call the personal property agreement. And in there we said, the seller is going to sell the hot tub to the buyer and he's going to do it for $1, right? Just $1, because you know what? He's not trying to get more money. We'd already agreed on a price anyway on the house and it was already coming with it. So we'll do it for $1. Well, keep this in mind. If a lender asks you to remove a hot tub from a contract because they're not going to lend on it and you do a side agreement, it has to be at a realistic value, a garage sale value of some sort. Because if something like a hot tub is so important to put into a contract and a side agreement and you're not putting a real value on it, think about this, guys. The value of the hot tub is in the house if all you're doing is buying it for $1, right? So with that in mind, you must put real value on it. Otherwise, you have to think about it. Why is it so important that we put it into a contract and it's only worth $1 and we put it in a side agreement? That's loan fraud if we don't put a real amount on it. So be careful with those side agreements. Lenders will tell you to just push that over into the personal property agreement. If you do that, though, your buyer's actually going to have to pay the money for it. That's fair market value. Now, what can be done is the seller can say, I will abandon said hot tub, so there's zero value on it. And you could do that. Now, if the seller and the buyer get, maybe a little upset around inspection or something, the seller may not abandon it. And there's no contract to hold it there. So if your buyer has what we would call exceptional property that is not going to be a normal inclusion, a hot tub or just weird stuff, you're going to have to do that personal property agreement separately. And with that in mind, make sure you're putting true values on that personal property. Otherwise, that would be considered loan fraud. Is there any questions on that? Because that's kind of been what I've seen a few times.
Quick question. Do you ever do a purchase and sales agreement to cover those kinds of things, just to put a real value to it and make a side agreement to any of this type of property you're speaking about?
Well, Paul, that's exactly what this does. So there, if you go into our documents, there's one called a personal property agreement. And that is exactly what it is. It's basically you list it out and a price. So that's when you check that box, you're saying that we are going to enter into a separate agreement. And Paul, don't make up your own little invoice for it. Use the form that Dora gave you. It's in CTM and it's also on Dora's website. But yes, that's what you would do in that case. Like I had one where there was a snow blower and we did that, you know? So yeah, but you do go to a different agreement and there is a form for it.
Great, thanks.
Absolutely. So you guys, 2.5.5, parking and storage, right? It's really nice. It says that you have the use or ownership. Now, you guys keep in mind, there's use and ownership differences. Now, in a single family residence, you own the garage, right? It's very clear. There's no question about it. But in condos and townhomes, do I own that garage bay or do I only have use of it while I own the condo, right? Well, the Real Estate Commission, it used to be either or. Now they've left it on there. They're both on there. You don't have to make a choice. It's really nice. Now, what you do want to do is be very, very specific. So if they have a parking spot and it's parking spot number 74, you're going to want to put parking spot number 74, right? If it's a storage facility, right? You guys ever been to those condo buildings where I got my condo, but down the hall there's some storage? You know, it'd be storage unit, whatever, right? 1, 2, 3. So be very specific of what those are, because the last thing you want to do is not be specific and not get your client the storage facility, right? And actually it would go right there. So on that, you have to do that. Now on, houses, single family, you can put this in here. To me, it's overkill. I actually do it, but you don't need to. So you can put 2-car attached garage. It's not needed. And then with the storage areas, well, think about this. The storage is either inside the house or it is in a storage shed. And that said, if we go back to up here, is already included, right? So you don't really need it. Hey guys, I'll be back in 90 seconds. Sorry guys, I have a small child and I locked my wife out of the house because we have like these hotel locks and she couldn't get in. So sorry about that. Okay, back to where we were. But be specific on parking. In terms of, houses, it doesn't really matter. So, okay. Exclusions. Again, be specific. What's included, what's not, right? Don't just say if there's a refrigerator in the garage, one in the house, they're taking the refrigerator, say refrigerator in garage or house. Don't just say refrigerator, right? So be specific. Going on down, 2.7, all this. I don't know anything about it. You probably don't either. So if you know anything about real estate, we don't do things we're not competent in. Water rights are very confusing and kind of weird. So with that in mind, if you're really looking at water rights, make sure you get an attorney involved, because at the end of the day, you do not want to mess that up. They're very expensive. They might have already been sold off, so make sure you know what that looks like. The only thing that I would do in here at all is 2.7.3. If I know that they have a well, they've advertised it, and I got the permit number, I'll put it in there. That's it. I don't mess with water rights. So unless you're very competent in that, which I'm guessing no one is, it's going to be an attorney at that point. So I'm going to run through dates and deadlines, guys. There are some dates and deadlines that we hardly, if ever, use. So for those, I'm not going to tell you what I use, but what I'll do is I'll tell you kind of my usual amount. So these are in business days, by the way, as well. So alternative earnest money deadline, I do it 3 days. And you'll notice I'm going to have a lot of the same days. I like to pair my days because my transaction coordinator, she has to deal with stuff on my deadlines, and I don't want a deadline every day. I want groups of deadlines. That makes it better for her. So with that in mind, earnest money, 3 days. Record title, 5. Record title objection, 7. Off record title deadline, 5. Off record title objection, 7. Title resolution, 10. Association document deadline, 7. Termination for association deadline, 10. Seller's property disclosure, 3. Lead-based paint disclosure deadline, 3. New loan application deadline, 3. I'm going to come back to that one and talk to you about it in a sec. New loan termination, I say when needed, about 27 days. Going on down, appraisal deadline, 21. Appraisal objection deadline, 23. Appraisal resolution deadline, 24. New ILC deadline, 21. New ILC objection, 23. Resolution, 24. Inspection objection, 7. I'm going to come back to termination and talk to you guys about that. But
Hey,
termination, I
Peter,
put
you're
at
going
10.
like really fast for these because I'm taking notes and like.
I'm
writing
sorry.
these down.
Yeah, let me go back, Danae. Sorry about that. Yeah, you guys, please slow me down. All right, so earnest money, 3. Record title deadline, 5. Record title objection deadline, 7. Off record title, 5. Off record title objection, 7. Title resolution, 10. You guys good?
Yep.
Association deadline, 7. Association documents termination, 10. Seller's property disclosure and lead-based paint disclosure are both 3. New loan termination or new loan application, 3. New loan termination, I say when needed. Appraisal deadline, 21. Appraisal objection deadline, 23. Appraisal resolution deadline, 24. We all good?
Move
Okay.
up. Good.
New
Hey,
ILC
Will.
deadline, 21.
Hey,
Yep.
can we go back to the appraisal deadline when you're done?
Yes, I have little notes. We're gonna go back to a bunch of these deadlines, Whitney. All right. New survey deadline, 21. New survey objection deadline, 23. New survey resolution, 24. Inspection objection, 7. Termination and resolution, I put on day 10. Property insurance termination, I put on 10. Due diligence delivery, 5. Due diligence objection, 7. Due diligence resolution, 10. Lead-based paint termination deadline, 5. Closing deadline or date, 30. You know,
Slow down again, please.
yeah. We're not losing yet, Deanna.
Property insurance termination,
10.
due diligence.
5, 7, 10. There's 3 of them. Conditional sale, I usually like to put that on closing date if possible, if I have one. Lead-based paint, deadline 5. Closing deadline 30. Possession, 30, whatever it is. So I'm gonna go back through these, and not all of them because we'll hit them at different places, but like a few that to me are really big. For example, new loan application deadline. So I actually don't put 3. The right thing to do is 3. So I teach you the right and I teach you how I do it. So the reason what I put is done. I put the word done there. And the reality is you cannot be done with a loan application until you go under contract on a property. The lender has to have a property address to finalize the application. So technically it should probably be about 3 days, right? Because that gives the time for the lender to actually finalize the application. The reason I put done is I don't want another agent to call me and say, wait, your buyer hasn't even filled out a loan application yet? Are they even approved? Because a lot of agents don't realize that to complete a loan application, you must have a property address. So I put done, but not everyone, at the end of the day, the technical right thing is, 1, 2, 3 days, something like that. In terms of appraisal, just so you guys know, those deadlines, if it is not conventional, they really don't matter. They only, for FHA and VA, and if you look below your dates and deadlines, like right here, it says those do not matter for VA and FHA. So with that in mind, I really only put deadlines in for conventional, or if you do USDA, because it's actually not defined in our contract, USDA, I'll do it for USDA as well, because I don't know the results on that. No one does. It's a government-backed loan, so I'm assuming they do not apply, but I don't know that. And I've looked it up, and I can't get a straight answer on it, so I don't do that. Whitney, does that answer your question on appraisal?
Well, I have
So
a
what,
Or maybe it wasn't Whitney.
it wasn't Whitney who had the question, it was Julie.
Sorry. What's up, Julie? What's your question?
So it's actually not a question, it's advice. So you're putting down 21 days on
Yeah.
your deadlines.
Yeah.
With the lack of number of appraisers we have licensed these days, ever since they changed the ruling, I forget when they did, that appraisers have to have 4-year college degree to be an appraiser these days. We're low on appraisers entering in the business.
Yep.
So because of it and the high refinance boom that comes into play, you're going to have problems meeting a 21-day. It's not the date that you're actually doing. You have to remember that it goes from the loan officer to a processor to like an LOA to a processor, and the loss of communication degrades. I literally make my agents put, when I was doing loans for agents, not myself, I don't do agent loans anymore. That you've got to really have a good lender that's going to know if you're going to put 21 days, they order the appraisal literally the day the client signs electronic documents, because the intent to proceed has been signed by the buyer in the loan documents. They will pay for appraisal up front, just like they do. But if they back out for the inspection, we can reverse the $650. But if I don't order that appraisal day 1, day 2, day 3, or right when the inspection's done, you're going to have a hard time. You're going to have a rush, and you're going to have these very stressful points in your loan at the end, because the processor is going to see day 21, and she won't even order it till like way after your inspection resolution deadline. And the appraisers are coming back with 2 and 3 week turn times.
Yeah, I mean, that could be an issue. I mean, it just depends, you know. Like, I can tell you guys this. I closed the deal on Tuesday. By day 11 in the contract, I had appraisal and inspection done. So it depends. I mean, the reality is, yes, if you have appraisal deadlines and closing deadlines and loan termination, talk to the lender, know your lender, right? And what it's going to take. Different lenders move differently, you know? That's why I recommend having a consistent lending partner, so that you know what to anticipate. So you're like, oh, when I work with Johnny, yeah, 21 days always works. That way I don't have to call Johnny every time I write an offer and make sure it's going to work, right? Like, for example, my lender usually does a 21-day close if needed. He got bogged down during COVID and the initial refinance craze. And with that in mind, he had to move up to 30-day closes. I talked to him yesterday because I was communicating with my lender like we should all be doing, right? Communicate with your vendors, and he can do 21 days again, right? So if that's push comes to shove, he can do it. So just be aware. And if I'm doing a 21-day close, guys, I don't write my deadlines this way, because it wouldn't work a 21-day appraisal deadline with a 21-day close. So yeah, my timelines get really short then. I would ideally always have my appraisal done or my inspection done, and then we order the appraisal every time, because we are in the fiercest seller's market ever, and it has no sign of release. So with that in mind, the faster you can get your deadlines done, the more contracts you'll get accepted. So work with a lender that can get an appraisal done really quick, and make sure you're communicating with those lenders. Know what's going on, know what they have, because the last thing we do is set a deadline that you can't hit. And I know it's tough, and I know that everyone in our industry has been pushed in different ways over the last year. And so instead of just, doing things that are going to put stress, communicate, figure out what works, and then do it. Does that work for you, Julie? Maybe.
Yeah, sorry, it does. Yeah, I took you off mute. Yeah, it does. I would say just when you're working with your lender, whether they're new or they're not, just make sure that you ask them to order the appraisal early. Make sure your client knows, like, yes, they're going to pay the, $600 for all the charges for inspection, and they're going to outlay $650, $625 in that appraisal up front, because it'll void $100 to $125 rush fee to the borrower at that time, and you guys having to renegotiate that contract. If I see a contract back in the day and the appraisal was kind of too, like I said, that appraisal won't work for me, maybe they put too short of a date or it didn't come in, just make sure your lender is communicating with the listing agent, on email and copying you that, hey, this is what's going on, because then they'll extend with no problem. But I've been, there's times that they won't extend, and if it doesn't come in value, and when the market starts to turn in the future, when the appraisals are going to stay flat instead of up, or they're going to downturn, you're going to see real big problems. And I've been through 2 downturns in my career as a lender, so it happens eventually. Hey,
Julie, I got a question for you. So if we order appraisal day 1, we get to day 7, inspection's awful. Appraisal hasn't happened yet, because they usually don't happen that quick when you order them. Can I still cancel and get my money back with most lenders?
110%.
Oh, God, there you go.
Yes.
Right, so that's what you do. So guys, the next deadline I want to talk about is inspection termination. I will tell you this, there's different schools of thought on it. You know, if you're using the termination deadline, the whole idea is, the reason the real estate commission brought it up is people were saying, we're going to do an inspection, and if we don't like it, we won't even try to negotiate, we'll just walk away. That's what that deadline was for. So when they put it in 3 years ago or 2.5 years ago, that's why they did it. However, with that in mind, guys, this deadline, some people say you put it up to, you match it to objection. And the whole idea is, you know, you do the inspection and you're either willing to negotiate or you just want to end it, right? So that's one school of thought. And my school of thought is this, you put it on resolution. That way you do your inspection. If it's really bad, you just terminate and walk away. You still have the ability to do that. But if you want, you start negotiating. So you turn over the objection, and maybe you have 4 days between objection and resolution. Maybe it's a day 2 and you're not getting anywhere and you want to end the deal. You still have a termination deadline to terminate on. You don't have to wait for the contract to automatically terminate on midnight of the resolution deadline. So I do termination and resolution together. Other people do termination and objection together. Do it either way. Just know why you do it that way. The other thing is down here on acceptance deadline, there's a box later on that we're going to look at, and it says will or will not. And what it's referring to is if a deadline is on a weekend or a holiday, it will or will not go to the next business day. So let's just say that I put my acceptance deadline of Sunday at 10 a.m. and I've checked that will box, that it will go to the next holiday or the next business day. My acceptance deadline is not technically Sunday. So just keep that in mind. A lot of listing agents won't go that far into the contract and look to see if you checked will or will not, but that would technically push that deadline out. Going on down to the next thing, applicability of terms. I'm just going to read this because this is a really big one. Any box checked in this contract means the corresponding provision applies, right? And what they're talking about is up here in the dates and deadlines. This is referring to section 3, but it also refers to the entire contract because here it says, it gets specific on 3.1. If any deadline blank, and dates and deadlines, is left blank or completed with NA or the word deleted, such deadline is not applicable and the corresponding provision containing the deadline is deleted. So for example, you guys, if I put up here NA, I don't have the right to do a survey, right? Because now it's been deleted. So keep in mind, CTM will autofill NA and stuff like that if you have those settings set on. So you might NA an important date. So be careful with that. The other place that this matters is not just in dates and deadlines, but throughout the contract. So for example, in seller concessions, if I put the word NA, because there's none applicable, we're not asking for any. Well, what happens when I get to inspection and I want a seller concession? It's not defined in the contract because I deleted it out of the original contract to buy and sell because you delete it out, right? It's no longer in there. It no longer is applicable. So if I take this out by putting NA here, I lose it. So what I like to put is the word none or 0. And then later, if we get to, inspection and, we're going to do a $2,000 concession, this still exists in the contract. Once I put deleted or NA, this no longer applies or is part of the contract. So if you do that and then you get to inspection, you're like, oh gosh, I deleted out accidentally and we want to get concessions, you need to highlight this entire paragraph and then put that into your amendment saying, hey, the seller concession shall be this, right? You have to redefine it because if you look at seller concession, what is it? It's all in big, bold, black letters, capital S, capital C. It's a defined term that you would delete it out. So make sure you redefine it if you delete it out. Does that make sense? Because that's kind of a weird one.
So what are you saying? Just leave it blank instead of NA?
So if any deadline is left blank or NA, the provision is gone. So blank doesn't work. So,
So what do I put if I am wanting to not redo it, but I want concessions later?
Oh, so what I would do, so like let's just say you left it blank, right? So now it's gone. I would take this entire section, I'd copy it, and I'd go to your, let's just go all the way to the bottom really quick so I have a big box. So I'd put it into an additional provision in an amend extend, right? We're not in a contract to buy and sell anymore. And all I would do is say right here, like let's just say the concession's 2,000. Just do that.
But what if I'm anticipating doing that from the get-go? What do I put in the seller concession box on the initial offer so I don't have to do this at the.
So right out the get-go,
objection
when you make an
objection.
offer, you put the amount. So if you're going to be, when you
But
make an
okay,
offer,
but I don't know the amount because we haven't gone through inspection. You're saying I have to do this at inspection objection if I'm asking for a concession, if I leave this blank or NA on the initial offer.
that's right. But if you put in here 0, we didn't delete it out of the contract,
Yeah.
still a part of the contract. So later I can just say seller concession shall be $2,000.
Okay. So
But if I
0 is
delete
what
it-
I want to put.
Yeah, I have to redefine it. But if you don't
Yeah.
delete it, then you can just say seller concession with a capital S and a capital C. Cool. One thing
Hey,
here
Will,
that I
really
just gotta
quick.
skip- uh-huh.
Hey, really quick, just a FYI for the newbies, and I don't mean to interject too much, and I won't. So when it starts to become a buyer's market, that's when that seller concession box will become more popular. Because when it comes a buyer's market and it turns, that's when you really want to pay attention to that and start negotiating with your lender. How much do we need for them to assist in closing? But right now in a seller's market, we're not using it very much.
It depends. We had a buyer leave the table the other day and got money back. So it does still happen.
Yeah, I've had that recently too, but not as often as a regular buyer's market. It gets
Sure.
really hot in that pocket.
Sure. So guys, real quick here, MEC is mutual execution of contract. You'll see dates and deadlines that are MEC. If you ever going to write a backup offer though, because I get these all the time with MEC deadlines, use TFC, the first contract. And if you go to Damian Cox's clauses, which we all have access to, the whole clause is in there. But just make sure you're using MEC when it's the right time and abbreviations like that. Going on down here, guys, this is the price box. I mean, it's pretty simple. How much money are we going to offer, right? What's the earnest money amount, and then how much is the new loan, right? Whatever that looks like, right? And then I'll tell you what your cash at closing is. So it's pretty simple. 4, 5, and 6, assumptive balance, private financing, and seller financing. If you go down that road, maybe get an attorney involved, or hopefully you know what you're doing, because these are pretty weird things. Assumptive, we may see that in the future since interest rates are really low. Let's just say interest rates in 5 years were at 8%, and I have 3% on my house. You might not want to just buy my house to get an 8% loan. You'd actually probably prefer to assume my loan. And so you would be able to take my loan over at 3% as opposed to getting a new loan at 8%. That's what an assumptive, that's what that would be. And you're going to assume the balance on it. So I don't see that right now with interest rates staying where they are. But if they do go up to 6, 7, 8%, there's real value in your interest rate. Okay. Earnest money. Here on earnest money, I will tell you this. I was talking to Ruth a few days ago. Ruth sees every contract that goes through our office. So with that in mind, I asked her, I go, what are people doing wrong? You know what they're doing wrong on earnest money right now? They're putting nothing in there. Where it says in the form of blank, in the form of a blank, right? What is that? So you're going to turn over earnest money in the form of what? Well, it's going to be what, cash or check or something like that. Probably not cash because it's closing, or the title company won't take cash, but it'll be a check or a wire. That's how we usually deliver earnest money, right? So with that in mind, don't leave this blank, because you're defining right here the earnest money set forth in this section in the form of whatever will be done this way. I've also done it in the form of a truck title, so it doesn't have to be cash. It can be other weird things as well. I will tell you on this though, a lot of times CTM will bring in the words good funds. Well, we're going to see good funds right here in a second and see what it means. Heck, let's just skip to it right now. Good funds are all amounts payable by the parties at closing. So I don't understand how that works for earnest money, because it's not something you put at closing. It's something you put early in the contract. So what I always put here is check or wire. I don't put personal check, because what if they use a business check? Then I have to amend the contract. Even though it's that subtle, you're now in default, right? So I do check or wire. Then held by, usually they list in the MLS who they want to held by. It's generally the title company. Unless it's RE/MAX, then it's generally RE/MAX. It just depends, but that's what you're going to put there, okay? Going on down, this is going to define what these deadlines are and what your rights are around earnest money. Again, good funds, that is money at closing, right? So that's what that looks like, right? So going on down, time of payment and available funds and what that looks like. Keep in mind, guys, if you're using CHFA or Metro DPA, with that in mind, you do not have the money, because here's what it says. It's saying the buyer represents that the buyer, as of this date, like right now, not like when I get my paycheck next week, but right now, as I'm writing this contract, that I do or I do not have the funds that are immediately verifiable and available in an amount not less than cash at closing, right? Cash at closing's up here. If I'm using CHFA or Metro down payment assistance, they're going to be contributing to my cash at close, or they're going to limit that cash at closing, right? Because this new loan amount is my primary loan. It doesn't include my secondary loan through CHFA. So I don't have that cash at closing. So if you're doing any down payment assistance, the real answer is no, I don't. If I have to sell my house to buy your house and I have to get my down payment for my current house, for my cash at closing, I do not have the money available. Now, I may want to sell my house to buy your house, but I might have a 401k that I can liquidate if need be. Then I could say I do have the money, right, to get that down payment. So it just depends, but you need to have that money to where you can get it in a matter of about a week, and you can show that balance. So that's what they're looking at there. So if it's something that takes, months to liquidate, like a house, you do not have it. It has to be verifiable and ready to go. Going on down. This just says who's going to pay your loan costs, right? And this just says the buyer's allowed to select financing, right? They can go with whoever they want. Well, we have three major loans that we deal with, right? Conventional, FHA, and VA. A bond, what would that be? Well, I believe that CHFA and the other down payment assistance program are funded through bonds. So you could check that if it was a bond program like that. Or you could also do other and put in CHFA right here, right? The other time you might do other if it's USDA financing, which if you guys don't know much about USDA financing, it's a pretty sweet tool. And you don't even have to go that far out of the metro to use it. So select what type. Now your client might say, I don't know. I might go conventional. I might go FHA, right? It depends on the house and the price point. So if you might go conventional or FHA and they have not decided what road to go down, you need to check both. Because I will tell you this, if you check only conventional and then the buyer decides to switch to FHA, you have to get the seller to agree to that. Because right now, if you only have conventional, the seller's only agreed to take that type of financing. And there are different implications around conventional and financing, especially with appraisal conditions. So a seller with a house that may have a ton of appraisal conditions may not let you go from conventional to FHA. But if you do submit the offer like this, then you can go either way. So just be aware of what you're doing. As I'm writing these contracts, guys, if you're using CTM, take assumptive and seller financing out unless you're actually doing it. There's no reason to add extra pages to our contract. It's already really long anyway. So you can remove those out of there. But like I said, if you're doing seller or private financing or an assumptive loan, make sure you're competent or you have an attorney involved, because the last thing you want to do is be in front of a judge and them say, hey, why did you think you were okay to do this?
Hey, Will, so going back to section 4.5.3.
Yeah.
They're doing like combinations of FHA and CHFA. So I would check
So I would check FHA.
and do,
I would do that. You
and
do
other?
bond. I don't like bond because people don't understand what it means. So I would do that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Absolutely. So we're going to section 5. So this tells you, again, it's going to define what these two deadlines are, right? New loan review or new loan review and new loan application, right? So those are right there. It's defining these terms again, right? We can take credit information out because we're not going to generally deal with that. Going down next is the appraisal section, right? So really 6.1, it just defines what an appraisal is. But 6.2, that's the part of the appraisal that applies to a conventional loan. So if you're not sure, if you go back to the dates and deadlines, all those dates and deadlines were 6.2. It is all these numbers right here. But if you go to 6.2.2, it's FHA, and then we have VA down here, right? So on things to be aware of on conventional, first you have a deadline. That's the deadline that the appraisal is actually given back to the buyer, I believe. Let's see, what does it say? The appraisal deadline. The buyer has to receive it by that deadline, right? If they don't receive it by that deadline, do you know the buyer can actually just walk away? If they get the appraisal a day late, it doesn't have to be low or anything like that. It says right here, if it's not received by the buyer on or before the appraisal deadline, buyer may terminate, right? So with that in mind, if you're getting to an appraisal deadline and the buyer doesn't have it and you're worried about them pulling out, extend that deadline. Don't give them the right just to walk away, because that could be a buyer's remorse deadline. Now, if the appraisal is low in value, for the objection, it's just not buyer's remorse, right? For the objection, it's a valuation issue or it's a condition issue. So they cannot have buyer's remorse and walk away unless the appraisal comes in late. So make sure they have their appraisal on time, right? Make sure you're communicating with the lender on the other side and all those kind of pieces. So you object, and then, you come to some sort of resolution on it, right? And then they have to withdraw the objection. Now, keep in mind, guys, I remember the first time I had an appraisal off, I'm like searching through CTM. Where's the form for the appraisal? There is no form. It's simply an email, right? It says notify the seller in writing, right? We don't have a form to use for a low appraisal. Now we get to FHA. The big thing that I look at in FHA is this box right here. What do we do with it? Setting forth, and here's what it says. So setting forth the appraised value of the property is not less than blank amount. Well, intuitively, I'm going to put the dollar amount that I'm under contract at, right? Whatever offer amount. So if I'm offering 400, I'm going to put 400 here, right? Now, what if I have an escalation clause that could take me to 420? Well, with that in mind, if I do that, I need to change this section too, because then what if the appraisal doesn't come in at 420? It comes in lower because this only says 400, not 420. So I don't like to put 400. I don't like to put a number in there. What I like to put in there, and this way if the purchase price ever changes, this does not have to be amended. It follows with it. So I put purchase price capital P and capital P because it's a defined amount, right? It's not the purchase price of, a drink at Starbucks. It is the purchase price of this house for this contract, right? So that's what I do there. For VA, you don't have to fill in anything, right? So that just talks about the rights of VA and what they have when it comes to a appraisal. Lender property requirements, this talks about what they could be. That, hey, there are lender property requirements that could come up and they have to get satisfied, right? So with that in mind, keep this in mind. If I send you, I say, hey, I need the peeling paint done, right? Well, here's what's going to happen. This is really important. So maybe I send it to you on, I don't know, a Friday afternoon. Hey, John, the paint's peeling, and that was a lender property requirement, right? So there you go, Friday. Saturday's day one. I don't hear back from John. It's a weekend. He maybe took the weekend off. Sunday's day two, right? On day three, which is Monday, it says, this contract terminates on the earlier of 3 days following the seller's receipt of the requirements, unless we have an agreement, right? So I send over my requirements, and we have 3 days or something else to happen. So what has to happen is either within 3 days, we have to agree to how these are going to be resolved. So on Friday, I said, hey, here's my issue. Saturday's day one, Sunday's day two, Monday's day three. Monday, the broker's super busy. He gets back to me Monday afternoon. He's like, hey, Will, my seller's waiting to get a quote back on the paint. I'll be in touch with you tomorrow and let you know what they say. We get to Tuesday, the contract's already terminated. It's 3 days. So when you send property requirements over, make sure you're on top of it because you have a 3-day window. Within the 3 days, they either have to be fixed, the lender has to remove it, or you have to have an agreement on how they'll be fixed. So how it's going to be fixed, the lender waives the requirement, or number 3, it's already fixed. Otherwise, you die on day 3.
Hey, Will. I have a question.
Yep.
I've never had this come up. So if this does come up, what form are we using for this to submit?
There are no forms for appraisal. It's email.
Just email?
It's email. Hey, here's the following lender requirements. They want the bars on the bedroom windows taken off, whatever it is.
Okay.
And I'll tell you this, Kenny, you will have it. I've cut bars off of 2 houses. I own a hacksaw purely for cutting bars off of windows. So you will have the opportunity one day too.
All right. Thanks, buddy.
Absolutely.
Hey, Will,
Yes.
how powerful, my suggestion is when I did it, to have the lender actually write the buyer's agent. I used to get permission to CC the listing agent, because if the verbiage comes from the lender, it has power, where it doesn't become this back and forth for my agent at the time, that I would take off that kind of heavy load, just so that you guys could then start working on the timing of those. But if it actually, the verbiage says that the appraiser needs these, and it's actually from the lender to them, is that okay? That's what I used to do. I don't even know.
Says if the lender imposes any written requirements, right? It doesn't actually say, let's see, beyond those, this contract terminates. It doesn't say who delivers them, right? It doesn't actually say. So it says if the lender has any requirements, including specified in the appraisal, to made to the property beyond those matters already agreed to, So I mean, it doesn't say. It could come from the lender, I suppose, or it could come from the agent. I don't know. Yeah, I do know we have a 3-day clock. That's defined. It doesn't say who has to send it over, though. So I guess that could work, Julie.
Well, I was just saying, like, when something comes from a lender, it's very difficult for a listing agent not to present that to the seller to demonstrate, look, it came from the lender.
I don't understand. So if I send it over, they won't present it to their seller? I don't get it.
Sometimes I've had really difficult, this is different times. I had really difficult listing agents where unless I called and said, yeah, this is the case. So then I just started emailing my buyer's agent and asking, can I CC, so that if there were problems on the appraisal. And this was like, 08, when we had more issues, like people walking away from properties and,
Sure.
you know, things were missing and, you know, a stove was missing and it became an issue. This was missing, it became an issue. So those times were a little different, but that could happen again. So I was just asking if anyone's ever done that or you would recommend it.
No, I mean, I don't think it's a bad idea, you know. But I mean, I can tell you, I've had a lot of appraisal property requirements over the years, and I think I've always told the other side, hey, here's the issue. And then how it gets worked out is different. I know I had once a fence that had to get painted, and it just happened in the middle of the night, because you guys know the buyer's not supposed to do it. It's supposed to be on the seller. And it just happened in the middle of the night. I don't know if my buyer did it or not. I'm not sure. But yeah, having the lender deliver it, I don't think it hurts. I mean, I can tell you, I just asked for an extension on something loan related, and the other side wanted to talk to the lender to make sure it was legitimate, right? So I understand that. Absolutely. So going down to section 7, guys. Section 7, here's what it all is, right? It's all about association documents, and there's a lot in there. I have clients like, oh, I'll pull them, and I tell my clients to say, you may not want to pull them. There's a lot of documents in there, and if you're missing something, you know, you have to deliver these. Why don't we just go to title? Title, it's usually about $60. So that's what I do. You do what you want to do. If your seller wants to pull it, or if you want to get logins, if their HOAs online and pull them for them, you can. The beautiful thing about all these documents, all these different things that we have to give them, they are required, and by they, I mean the HOA, to annually give all of this to the seller. They should already have all of this because they annually have to do it. Bigger HOAs, in my opinion, are usually easier to get documents from than smaller ones. But I'll tell you, best practice, have the documents before you go on the market. I have a listing under contract right now. We're under contract, I don't know, over the weekend. We had the documents up front. So with that in mind, as soon as we're under contract, we had them. Some HOAs, it can be tough to get docs. So why not have them up front? And then, you know, if your seller wants to pull them, they can. It's however you want to do it. But this is all the documents. And like I said, there's a lot of words in there. I don't even know how many documents there are, but there's a lot. This talks about how the buyer has the right to approve the documents, review them and whatnot, and walk away if they want to, right? Now, section 8, we're going to talk about title, right? So with that, the first thing is, who picks title? Well, generally in our state, it is the seller, right? I think that's pretty true across the board, even though it's weird because title, really it's for the buyer, but seller picks it. There are some different title companies out there that are not as good, as well-funded. So be careful. If you've never heard of the title company, you might want to see who underwrites them. Are they a worthy title company? Because what happens if it doesn't work out for your buyer? Are they going to go after just the seller? Or are they going to go after the seller, the listing agent, and probably you too, right? They probably will. So if I have a weird title company that I'm not okay with, like WGN, for example, or I can't remember. It starts with a W. I will hit buyer selects title company. However, keep in mind, when the buyer selects it, it's at the buyer's expense. And, you know, so with that in mind, if your buyer's okay with it, go ahead and do it. Now, the other thing you can do too, though, is you can have buyer selects title, and then additional provisions. You can say buyer selects, however, it's still the seller's expense. So if I'm overriding the title because I don't like the company, I still put the cost on the seller. So that's the little nuance there. Owner's extended coverage, y'all. If you're not getting it, I mean, you're just not doing good for your buyer. It's about $70, right? So I say that it will be included. And I generally put it on the buyer, especially in this market because it's so competitive. Hey, buyer, do you want the house and you pay $70, or do you not want it, right? Because it looks good when that every expense isn't covered by the seller. It covers a lot of things. If you look at it here, it's pretty freaking awesome what you get for $70. And I can tell y'all, when we had the shutdowns last spring, it was a really big deal about this gap period. The gap period is the time between when the house closes and when it's fully recorded. Well, generally that's pretty quick nowadays, right? With technology, electronics, and stuff like that. We had a period there back in April and May where stuff just wasn't getting recorded. So if anything happened or weird and you didn't know owner's extended coverage, you were not in a good spot. So I highly encourage it. If you don't get it, I think it's silly. And if your client doesn't want it, sure. But if they don't want it, it's because you haven't educated them on the importance of it. For example, what I say, because this is the easy explanation, as I go to the mechanics lien, I say, hey, what this is going to do, it's going to cover a bunch of little things. It's kind of like a little add-on for your insurance. Like, for example, what if the day before closing, there was a huge, plumbing issue, and the seller decides not to pay the plumber because they think, hey, I'm moving out of the country, it won't impact me. Well, it won't impact the seller at that point, because if they're in Venezuela, good luck getting the money. But it will impact the house, because they'll put a lien on the house. So make sure that your buyer's aware of it. If they don't get it, you have not explained it correctly. The rest of it is just talking about actually different terms, right? Like, what is a title document? What should it have? What should it include? Who's going to get top copies of them? Who's paying for it? How's that going to work? We don't really work with abstracts often. So with that in mind, that probably wouldn't happen. But, if the seller, they can deliver abstracts and stuff like that. Record title, this is going to go through what they're pulling in that. This is defining that term and what they're actually looking for, and the objection and the deadline. Again, we're defining terms in here and what they actually mean with off-record title. Special taxing districts, it talks about what that looks like. Whenever they put it like this in all capital letters, you know what it means? It means that there's people ticked off about it. So, for example, there's special taxing districts that have come up with new builds, and then they had a sunset where they're going to go away eventually. However, there was like a little line where they could just keep the higher property tax forever. So that's why they put this into the contract so big. So your buyer's like, hey. So if you're ever in a special taxing district, you need to find out what the implications are for your client, because they're not going to be happy if it doesn't work out well. And whether right or wrong, when the buyer's not happy, they come for you. So keep that in mind. This talks about the rights of how to object through title and what that looks like. So look at all that. Now, this other section here, oil and gas, right? I don't know if you guys know this, but most of our oil and gas and mineral rights and water rights were severed already from your property. A lot of it happened with the railroad years ago. The way we got the railroad to go is we said, hey guys, if you build a railroad, we'll give you the mineral rights. So this is just talking about, hey, there could be mineral rights, but they've probably been severed. So with that in mind, they don't necessarily transfer. Be aware if you have mineral rights or not. Now, if your client's concerned about the mineral rights or gas or anything like that, again, just like water, you're probably going to want to get an attorney, because again, those are very confusing, the way they've been handled over the years and the way they've been recorded. So make sure if they really want that, the rights to the gas below, so they can do a gas lease or something like that, they actually have them, okay? And then actually, here's what it says right here. Consult an attorney, right? Why? So with that in mind, guys, we are a limited, we're not attorneys. So be careful what you advise on title, because it actually tells the client to not ask you, just to ask an attorney. Buyer's advice to ask an attorney for all matters, right? For all these different things. So what I usually do with weird title stuff is I refer them, I say, hey, you can get an attorney or try title first. Usually title will give them an explanation that they understand, and they can avoid the attorney cost, okay? So section 9. I imagine most of us practice real estate within Denver Metro. So surveys, you're probably like, I don't know, do we really need them? Do we really not need them? I don't know, kind of thing, right? You go out east or you go up west into the foothills, you're like, oh yeah, this is an acreage property. We definitely need it. Well, I'll tell you all this. My philosophy is you give the option on the survey. And what I mean by that is you put dates and deadlines back in that section, because if you don't put them in, this whole section's already gone. So you give yourself dates and deadlines on every contract, except maybe a condo or a townhome, because they're probably not going to have a survey. Although I did have a duplex where an ILC was required. So you may have it on a townhome. Like, give them the option, right? Don't make decisions for your clients. Educate them so they can make it. So I put dates and deadlines in, and then I tell my clients, say, hey, look, if you want to do a survey, you can do it. It's up to you. So what I generally check is I say in the form required by buyer's lender or seller's closing company. I don't say title company, because title company is not defined in our contract. That's just jargon that we use. What is defined is closing company. That would be your title company. So I say in the form required by buyer's lender or closing company. Who usually requires the survey? Usually it's the title company, right? The closing company. So I put that there. Whatever form is going to be required by them is, because I don't know if they're going to want a full-blown survey or an ILC. because there's a very big difference there. So I just say in the form required by them, right? And then when I do in 9.1.1, who do I have order it? Well, the buyer. Why? I'm a control freak. I want to make sure it's a good company that my buyer gets to use. Now, who's going to pay for it? Well, that depends. And for payment, I put it like this. I say, if buyer's lender requires survey, buyer shall pay. I've never had a lender require survey, so that probably won't happen. If seller's closing company requires a survey, seller shall pay. It's usually almost always title, right? Because title is insuring the property. So if you do that, your buyer will probably never have to pay for a survey. Now, a required survey, because it's almost title that always requires it. Now, if your buyer just wants one to want one, they have the option. And since it's not required by anybody, they'd be the one paying. But they do have the ability to do one because you already put dates and deadlines in. So give them the option. And I will tell you guys, I sold a house not that, maybe 2 years ago, or by the dog food factory, right? And so that area, right, all the houses there are pretty clear. You see, like, you know, the property lines, fence around it, and all these things, right? So I did not help the guy buy the property. I was the listing agent. I went there, we sold it. It was pretty clear. I mean, his neighbor had a fence, the other neighbor had a fence. Behind his house, there was an alley, and then there was a street. So it was like property lines. They looked very clear to me. Well, a few months later after closing, he gets a bill in the mail. He gets a tax bill. So when he bought the property, he didn't do a survey. And with that in mind, he bought this property. It actually had 2 different lots on it. One of the lots was the one with the house and was a big lot. The other one was 4 feet wide and ran the entire length of the property. So you had his neighbor's fence. You had 4 feet of width that then went all the way from front to back. And it went through his driveway. So what he got was a bill for the property taxes on this little strip of land. And it was like $250, right? But that meant that forever he was gonna have to pay like $250 a year to property taxes. So my client wasn't happy. You know, I mean, I didn't do a survey. I don't do surveys on my listings, so I didn't know. He wasn't really mad at me, but he's like, hey, what do we do about this? So what we ended up doing is we went to the buyer. We said, hey, buyer, this little strip of land that you thought you bought, you did not. Would you like to buy it? And what did we sell him to it for? We sold it to him for the amount of the tax bill, for $250. That's all we did, and sold him that portion, and title helped us deal with that. So even when it looks very clear, hey, here's a fence, here's an alley, here's a street, it's not always that clear. So give your buyer the choice. All right. Any questions on surveys?
Hey, Will,
Yeah.
you have some questions in the chat, man.
Oh, gosh. Thank you, Kenny. Guys, I am really bad at chat. Please unmute yourself and ask me. Okay, I'm just going to go through chat questions real quick. You always pursue president line. Where can we find Damien's clause? So that was from Julie. So guys, I'll just show you. If you use CTM, if you hit the clause button, you see the ones that say D Cox on it? Those are the ones. Look at all these D Cox ones, right? We have a ton of them. Since you are part of Keller Williams Downtown, you will already have access to Damien's clauses. Another place I believe that you can get them is in the intranet. I'm not 100%, but I believe you can get them there, or I believe Brett or Asia have them. Money orders, I can tell you, Jules, for earnest money, I actually just had an issue with them. They will not take money orders for earnest money. The problem also be with your lender, right? Because the lender, the issue there is they're not gonna be able to trace the money. Whitney, I do not put the HOA docs on MLS. I just have them ready to go. I mean, you can put them in supplements, like, I don't know. It's not gonna really hurt your seller, but I just have them ready to go. And we just have them already uploaded into docs management and CTM. So as soon as we, go under contract, we just go boom, boom, and send them. So Jules, you said that buyers not have to use down payment assistance. Why?
Hi, well, technically it's a Privacy Act. So you can disclose FHA, conventional, cash, VA. You don't have to disclose that they're getting it from a gift from their parents. That's Privacy Act. But the down payment, if it's a bond, you can put the bond. But I've been told that they don't have to know that we're using a DPA and then overview, like not look at our contract.
Is DPA a loan?
Yeah.
Yeah. So buyer may purchase the property using any of the following types of loans. So are you going to use a loan that you're not allowed to use because you didn't put it in here?
Like if they did FHA, we never put Chafa on the contract when I did the loan. And it was because of privacy. They don't have to know that they're getting a down payment legally.
Well, you're doing a secondary loan on the house, a second mortgage, which is
If
a
they
loan.
were doing if they're doing Chafa, let's pretend.
Right. So Chafa is a second mortgage, which is a loan. And it says buyer may purchase the property using any of the following types of loans. You have to put it there. Because here's the reality. If I have two offers that are identical and the only difference is Chafa, I'm taking the non-Chafa because I know that I have a second round of underwriting with Chafa. So if they're identical in every way, I will take the non-Chafa every time. And it says here in the offer, I mean, you do what you want with your deals, but I'm telling you, it says buyer may purchase the property using any of the following loan types. And if you don't list all the loans that are being used here, how can you use it? I don't know that. It's not a privacy act.
That's why I asked it.
Yeah, it's not a privacy act. And I think a lender needs to disclose it as well. And then what else do you have here?
That was a really good question. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a great question. It's just one of those things of, I used to not disclose as well, Jules. And then I was in a class and they're like, no, that's straight up fraud. That's what you've done. And then I've been taught I do not have to disclose the buyers using them. You mentioned a gift, so if they're getting gift funds for their down payment, and I don't know if you're going back to here, if they do or do not have the money, if they're getting gift funds, again, they don't have the money. Now, if my mom already gave me the money, and it's already in my account, I could say I do, right? So you just have to be careful about that. So Eric, you have a thing that says, ask this question out loud, please. I'm sorry, I don't know what question that is. I missed that, or maybe it was the one before. So if you want to clarify that, you can. OEC, what do you typically put to pay? I typically put the buyer. I also do that with the closing fee because that's only about $350. So you choose 9.1, you choose or ready to close. Yeah, so I do that, Whitney. I say if the buyer's lender requires it, buyer shall pay. If the seller's title company requires it, seller shall pay. So that's exactly what I do every time. And then what do you write for 9.1? New survey in the form of, I put required by buyer's lender or seller's closing company. Because I don't know, I've had a title company require an ILC and I've had them require a full-blown survey. And I don't know which one it's going to be. So that's what I put there. And I think we're all caught up. Any other questions? No? Okay. So section 10. So this is property inspection, all sorts of fun stuff here, right? So again, it's going to say, hey, here's what the seller's property disclosure is. Now, if you guys were on Damien's class today, you heard this. It's at the date of contract. So let's just say I sign a listing today, but my clients don't want to go on the market until they buy their new house and move into it. So we're going to go on market until March 1st. Well, the seller's property disclosure has to be, and so we go on the market March 1st, we go under contract March 2nd. That's the date that it has to be current as. So if we fill it out January 7th, but go under contract March 2nd, that's okay as long as nothing has changed. So keep in mind, guys, if anything changes, you got to let them know. So, you can have them fill out early. There's nothing wrong with that. But if anything changes, make sure that they're ready to update that seller's property disclosure.
Well, what if a seller doesn't want to? I had one that didn't want to do a disclosure.
Why?
I don't know. I couldn't, he finally did one, but if there's anything known that they've told us, we still have to disclose that as the agent.
That's correct. I mean,
So
here's
where do
the thing. I think even when I have someone that's never lived in the house, right? There are very few times where I can see that you would not fill one out because you've got to have some knowledge. And all it says is if you have knowledge of this, does this work or not? If I have knowledge. For example, I did a 5-house estate sale back in May. And the woman that owned the houses, she was still alive, but she had dementia. And her family didn't exist. The state of Texas actually took over her whole estate, and I sold it through an attorney representing the state of Texas and her. The attorney didn't know anything about the property. We still did a seller's property disclosure. All we did was at the very end, she signed. She had no idea about anything. So I always have my clients do them. I don't see a reason why you never would, unless you're hiding something. So what I tell them is, I believe education is what solves a lot of these issues. So you say, hey, look, here's the seller's property disclosure. It's a 6-page form of fun. Go through it, and if there's anything in there that you feel like you should disclose, disclose it. Because what this is it's a CYA form. Let's just say that you put in there that the roof leaks really, really bad. And then 3 months down the road, the buyer sues you because the roof leaks really, really bad. You can go tell the judge, I disclose this. This is for you to tell them anything you know so that later on it doesn't come back to hurt you. Here you go. And I mean, there's sometimes with people that own rentals that they're weird about them, but my clients, and if they're like, well, I don't know much about the house. I'll be like, do you know the age of the house? Well, yeah, it was built in 1979. There you go. You know one thing. Let's put that on there. Let's keep going. So most sellers will do them if they understand what it's for, in my opinion. That's been my experience. But yeah, like you were saying, Julie, in terms of disclosure, it's adverse material facts, right? Stuff that we know about is the condition of the house. So with that in mind, I would disclose it. And if they ever have the question, should I disclose blank? The answer 95% of the time is yes. Whitney said, date of contract. Some agents write the date offer was submitted. So are you asking like the date that the contract, like in the top corner, Whitney?
Yes, that's what I'm asking.
I mean, how big is that going to be? Maybe I write the offer on Thursday and then you guys accept it on Monday. I mean, at the end of the day, even after you go under contract, if something happens, you should still disclose it. So I look at it, because it's still an adverse material fact, right? Hail happens after you're under contract. So to me, it's like the date of contract. It should represent as of the date of this contract. I mean, you're only going to have a 4-day window unless something really big happens, hailstorm, snowstorm, flood. I don't know. I don't think it's going to really ever come up. Does that make sense?
Yep, that's good. Thank you.
Cool. But yeah, you guys, the other thing too is buyers have the right to terminate based on the seller's new disclosure. So if something comes up, because it actually says that in here, what I was just saying. So in the event the seller discovers a new fact, right, something I discovered while we were under contract, I must disclose it. That's what it says right here. I must disclose it. So if I'm redisclosing, like maybe I just learned that my roof leaks, so I went into the attic and I was moving some stuff that I saw was leaking in there. Now I have to disclose it. The buyer now has the right to pull out 5 days after that disclosure, right? So make sure you are redisclosing. That's where that date of contract, I don't know, because you still have to redisclose if something happens. I don't know why they put that in there, but they did. So, all right, guys, inspection. Here's a big thing. Not everyone knows what inspection's for. A lot of people think it's just for number 1 right here, which number 1 says the physical condition of the property, right? But it goes beyond that. It's not just the roof, the walls, the structure, the HVAC. It goes beyond that. It's also the physical property that's included, right? So like with that, oh my God, the stove doesn't work. Well, that's an inclusion. That's an issue, right? So we all know about that one. What about service to the property, right? So that could be where my power lines come in. You guys ever had the power lines in the backyard that sag real low and you don't want the kid to hit it accidentally? That'd be your service to the property, right? And not just that, but it could also be other things, right? The systems and components of it, but also with the service is what you actually have accessible, right? I have a client that I closed on the other day. He was not very thrilled that all he could get was Comcast, right? But that's service to the property. He could have killed it over inspection because he could only get Comcast. He couldn't get CenturyLink internet, right? Other things, propose an existing transport project. So if they're like, oh, that's going to be a highway over there, they can walk away. And then any other activity, odor, or noise. Are they by the dog food factory? They didn't realize it. Are you in Fort Morgan and you smell the meat factory? They can kill it over odor and noise. I've had a client that's gone back to a house after one under contract during rush hour and sat out there and they said there was too much road noise. So it's not just the house and the actual content that's included. It goes well beyond that. Going on down, this is a really big one, guys. So let's just say that you're the agent and you're the buyer's agent, and what happens? You have a buyer go in and they do this report and all this work and they mess stuff up. Who's responsible for all this, right? So buyer, except as otherwise provided in the contract, is responsible for all the payments of the survey, right? And must pay for any damage that occurs to the property. Now, I don't know where your buyers pick their home inspectors from. Mine usually take the one that I recommend, and I imagine that's how it works for you too. So let's just say the home inspector goes there. This is a true story. He went to a house. He tested the washing machine, the dish machine. Does that last? Okay, test it out. doesn't see any initial leak, leaves the house. Okay, no buyer's agent there, no buyer there. He leaves the house and the machine keeps running. He forgot to turn it off. Well, the machine starts leaking. The house is vacant. So now it sits there for days with a huge pool of water on this gorgeous wood floor. Wood floor is destroyed. Who's responsible? Technically the buyer. However, who's the buyer going to go for? They're going to go for you. So you may want to go to your inspections, if nothing else, at the very end, just to lock up, because you're on the hook for that. And from what I understand, when you give a lockbox to a home inspector and you leave, you are not going to have errors and omissions insurance covering you. So keep that in mind. All right, guys, section 10.6.1 and 10.6.12. All right, so these are due diligence, right? One would be for leases, right? So with that in mind, if they have solar panels, you need to know, are they owned or are they leased? If they're leased, you're going to ask for the lease right here, right? You're going to say lease for solar panels, right? If they're owned, I'm going to jump back up actually. You'll check it right here. So if they are leased solar panels, if there are solar panels and you do not know, find out, is it owned or not? Water softener, is it owned or not? Some are, some aren't. Security system, a lot of those aren't owned, right? So find out what that looks like. The big thing there is to communicate, right? So when you're in section 10.6, this is we're going to say, I want the lease for the solar panels or the lease for the whatever it could be, right? It's generally solar panels, what we see there. The other thing too is in 10.6.1.2, you're going to be asking for other documents, guys. Now, I am one of those people that does something that Damian Cox is not a fan of. I put this into my contract every time, unless I want something more specific. So if I don't want something specific, I put a blanket statement that says, hey, if you have all this stuff, give it to us. This is kind of already in the contract, so it is overkill. So you can do a statement like this if you want. It's up to you. If you do put anything to due diligence, though, make sure you check that box. Otherwise, it doesn't apply. So check the box and put it in there. The time that this section really matters for me is if my client is buying a house with solar panels and they're taking over that lease, right? So we say we want the solar panel lease here. Let's say the lease is $100 a month. Well, then what we're going to want to know is how much is the power every month? Does it make sense to pay $100 a month on the solar lease or does it not? So I'll also say maybe I'll go down to here and say last 3 months of power bills, right? To see, are we having the offset in the power bill based on that lease, right? So that's when it really matters to me. There's other instances too, maybe if you're doing a septic or something like that, but 10.6.1.1 is for leased items and 1.2 is for really anything else that's really important to your client. Going on down. So this is going to talk about due diligence, what the different deadlines are and what they mean and how they impact it. If you have a house that you have to sell to buy, that's what a conditional sale property is for. So you would say 123 Main Street, right? Denver, Colorado is what you'd put in here, whatever the address is. So you're defining the property for the conditional sale deadline. Source of water, usually you're going to say, I do not know the source, because usually you do not know unless they've already emailed it to you. Now here's one right here. Is there a well or not? I mean, in Denver, usually you can assume that there is no well. However, we assume things and it doesn't always work out. I sold a house last year in Thornton with a little well in the backyard. I sold one in Lakewood not that long ago. They're capped off wells, but they're still there. So I generally put does not or just leave it blank because I don't really know, right, if there's a well or not, unless the other side's already disclosed it, something we wouldn't know. Lead-based paint, guys, the nice thing about lead-based paint now, the one thing I'll really say about it is this. You have a deadline. You have your disclosure deadline. When the disclosure deadline is, and like I said, I write it 3 days in. For the benefit of the buyer, seller, and all required real estate licensees must sign and deliver. So on the deadline, let's just say it's today, you know, it comes over and your TC just sends it over to the buyer. If you don't sign it, you're actually in default of this deadline. So when it goes to the buyer, it needs to have your signature, the listing agent's signature, and the seller's signature. So keep that in mind. Otherwise, you have not hit your lead-based paint disclosure deadline. Okay. If someone wants to do a lead-based paint assessment, there's their rights to do so. I've never had it done. Carbon monoxide detectors, guys, they're actually, this is in the listing agreement. They're supposed to be on there before you ever hit the market. The reason being is if you have a carbon monoxide leak, well, people will die in the house. So they should already be there. However, if not, this is letting you know where they have to be and how many in the house, right? It's not how many, but it's really If you can satisfy the requirement with one, great. It might take multiples. It depends where the bedrooms are located, right? What it really is it's 15 feet of the entrance of any bedroom. So if you have like a wall plug and maybe in a hallway, and there's 3 bedrooms where all 3 doors are within 15 feet of that wall plug, you could use one for the whole house. But if there's bedrooms on different floors, you'll need multiple carbon monoxide detectors. Methamphetamine, y'all, it's not that good of stuff, so don't mess with it. But you know, if the seller knows that methamphetamine was ever manufactured or stored, they gotta disclose it. Why? It can do birth defects and all sorts of nasty, nasty stuff. However, no disclosure is needed if the property was accurately remediated. Now, again, if you think about this, think about Google, and they could Google my house, because a lot of people, once they go into contact, they Google the house, they'll find out it was a methamphetamine house. So if it was me, guys, because we actually had this happen where it was like we saw our client sent us a YouTube video of their house being raided by some sheriff's department, right? So if there's meth, let them know up front and give them all the documents disclosing it, you know, and all the remediation documents, because they will probably find out. And I can tell you, when our buyer found out like 3 weeks in that they were buying a remediated meth house, they were not very thrilled about it. And the deal did not get to closing. I'll just put it that way. Closing documents. So at the end of the day, guys, there's closing documents and closing information. We're going to cooperate with the closing company to make sure that we get all that done, right? So that's what they're saying in that one. Closing instructions, are they or are they not executed with this contract? You guys, I've never received with an offer closing instructions, ever. So I would say there almost are not, unless the listing agent has put the closing instructions into the supplements and you sign them and submit them with your offer, they're going to not be included with the contract. Now, closing date and all this, the hour and place and where it will be. I see all sorts of stuff in here. My favorite thing is to put this, because if you put mutual agreement, what happens if we had a really bad deal and the seller and the buyer can't come to terms on it, right? Now, the reality is, guys, at the end of the day, buyers close at the time of the day that works best for them, and sellers close what's best for them. So if you put seller and the seller demands that the buyer close at 9 a.m., the buyer cannot be there at 9 a.m., they're technically in default. So I just put closing company. That way, whatever day and time works best, or hour and location works best for the closing company, that's where they are, and that's how we get it done. So I do there. Disclosure of settlement services. We're just saying, hey, guys, there's a lot of different providers out there. Go with whoever you want. Section 13, you guys, there's a lot of different types of deeds in here. The two that I see the biggest questions about are these two now. So we generally do general warranty or special warranty. Can anyone tell me the difference between the two? No? Okay. Well, basically it works like this. General warranty, the seller represents forever. I am saying that, you know, forever, my deed gives you the right to have this property going all the way back to time. There's nothing in the past that's going to come back to get you, right? It's not just while I own the house that I know my deed's good for. I'm saying it's good forever. That's the beginning of time. That's a lot for a seller to say, right? Special warranty, the seller is saying, I'm giving you this property and all I know about it is when I owned it. So actually the special warranty does protect the seller. So you'll see some sellers that want to use that. Builders use it, flippers use it. Now, it used to be that it was kind of an issue for the buyer. Did they have protection going back further? However, now that title prepares the deeds and is responsible for them, if you have title insurance, general warranty and special warranty operate the same for the buyer, because at the end of the day, title will give you the coverage back to the beginning of time. It's not what the seller's saying, it's what title's saying. So with that in mind, I'm okay with my buyer getting special warranty or general warranty. I generally write general. The other one that we'll see most often is personal representative deeds, and that's going to be when you have, you know, an estate sale. All right, going on down, closing costs, guys. My big thing on this whole section of 15 is know where you are and know what you're doing. So closing costs, we're always going to have that, right? If you want to do a buyer, seller, or closing service fee, it's going to be about $350 depending on the title company, maybe $370. You have to educate your buyer, let them make the decision. Status letter and record change fees. Well, if you have an HOA, you're going to have those.
I have a quick question about deeds, a quick claim deed. This is, I don't know if it's off subject or not, but is taxes associated with the quit claim deed?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't know. I can tell you this. It's not something that I practice in. I mean, Quit claim means that you're representing no ownership or anything of the property. Generally, we see it when husband and wives are added to title or something like that, or family transactions. But quit claim, it's nothing. I've never transferred property on a quit claim, and I don't recommend you do it. Although I will quit claim you the ball center tomorrow if you want.
Hey, Will, really quick on quit claim, just so everyone knows, when a lender gives out a loan to people and there's a husband and wife, they can be on title. But if the husband has good credit and the wife has bad or vice versa, you're going to just have the husband on the loan. So the wife's on the quit claim, on the deed day one. Now, if you actually quit claim somebody related to the actual transaction, there's a clause in the promissory note that's an escalation clause. If they change it into a lot of trusts or business names or add their new wife to the title, if the buyer's original lender finds out, there's an escalation clause that's called due on demand. They will actually ask for the $350,000 immediately. So just having people quit claim on and off, I would never advise.
Yeah, make sure your lender's okay with it, right? Because they actually own more of the house than you do. Whitney, I don't understand your question. Closing costs, what does Will typically do? I've seen this all over the place. What do you mean?
I just mean that when I'm looking at contracts, when I'm reviewing offers, people write sometimes the status letter is buyer, seller. And so I just want some clarification. For instance, the closing service fees, you estimated that how much do all these fees? And so I should check with my title company to see what the costs are.
Yeah, every title company is going to have a different closing service fee, but it's like $350 to $380, right? And your OEC coverage is going to be roughly 70. It might be 80. So I just tell my buyers, I say, if we're in a competitive situation, I'm like, so look, between the closing service fee and the OEC, we're looking at about $425, $430. Would you want to lose the offer over that, or would you want your offer to look stronger because it says buyer pays? Now, status letter and record change fees, they're probably those, I don't know what that is. It could be $50, it could be $500. So with that one, putting that on my buyer, I generally don't. I generally put those on sellers because I don't necessarily know what they are. Some and very few agents will put that in MLS. So with those ones, I generally put on seller because I just don't know. And if you call the other agent, you know what? They're probably not going to know either. So that's how I do that, Whitney. It's up to that. It depends. If the market, I tell them this, if the house has been on the market for 4 months, we're going to hit it low on price. Like, let's hit it really low on price, but let's just pay this $425, right? So it just depends on the situation. You have to educate your buyers to make the best decision. Private transfer fee and local transfer fee, you really don't have those in Denver Metro. If you go up into like Summit County and stuff like that, these do exist. Water transfer fees, those can exist. Know where you're doing real estate and ask the other agent if they know of any. Sales and use tax, again, we don't really have that down here. Some of that exists in Summit County. To you guys, if you're dealing with the seller being a foreigner, you may not know that. If they put it into broker remarks on the MLS, then you can check this box if they are a foreign person. But if you're not sure, I would leave it blank because most deals you'll have will not be with a foreign person. Colorado withholding, this is just a disclosure about withholding they do on taxes. In Section 16, guys, if the market is going up, always do most mill levy. What that means is as the market's going up, and they reassess property taxes, they'll keep assessing it higher and higher. And so that way your buyer gets the most credit for property taxes. If the market's going down, which I don't know when that'll happen, but when it does, they keep assessing the property tax down. And with that in mind, when they do it down, your client may not have enough money left for the previous year. So in a down market, it's taxes for the calendar year that was preceding. In an up market, which we're going to be in all year, it's most recent mill levy. That's how I do it. Does that make sense? Cool. Rents, you have to decide how would your client want to deal with this, accrued or actually received. That's if there's a renter already in there and they're buying it. Association assessments, they're saying if there's any special assessment prior to closing, who's going to pay for it? I always check seller. I've never been countered on it. Now, a lot of times if there's a special assessment 2 days prior to closing, it's probably going to benefit the buyer, right? Like a new parking lot or something like that. But I still put it on the seller, and I've never had an issue with that. Going on down to here, when you put possession, I make sure that this number hurts, right? And make sure it's worth going to court over, right? So I don't know, $450, right? Because $450 a day, if that's where you're going to stay in that house at, it's going to hurt you really bad. You're going to get out quick. So the seller won't stay very long. The other side of it is $450 a day. That's going to cover a hotel and additional storage that my client has to deal with, right? So I like to make that painful. The higher the price point, the higher that goes. Right here, if it's an investor, you need to check this box and that's not their principal residence. If there's going to be a post-occupancy, you check this box and say that we agree to execute one. I will tell you this, you don't have to do the post-occupancy at time of offer. I do highly recommend it, especially if you're going to ask for rent or security deposit, because if you have a nasty inspection and then you try to ask for rent, they're going to tell you to just shuff right off. So I would actually send the post-occupancy with your offer, but that's up to you. You don't have to. Right here's where I said there'd be a will or will not for computation of days. So if a day is a holiday or a weekend or something like that, you can check the will box and it will move the deadline to the next day. You guys, I don't know if y'all know this, in 11 days is a holiday. It's called Martin Luther King Day. I have a scheduled closing that day, and if I had checked will not, we'd have to figure out how to make it work. I skipped this here, guys. But keep in mind, a day, right? Our deadlines, if you just put a deadline of a date, you don't put a time, it's 11:59 p.m., okay? Going through, if there is something that happens while you're under contract, to the house, if there's a loss or something like that, the seller has to fix it. Now, if there's a full condemnation where the house is just in really bad shape, maybe a fire happens or something like that, other actions can happen. But, if just the refrigerator goes out, they do have to fix that. There is a walkthrough verification where your client can go through and make sure everything was done. Right here, they're saying that there is no home warranty that's automatically included. However, if you want, you can get one. Right here, it's just saying, again, get legal and tax counsel if you like. This is right here saying that time is of the essence, right? So what that means is that we are all working towards a goal. We're all moving forward in good faith with that. So we are sticking by our dates and deadlines. Right here, it talks about if the buyer's in default, what can happen. So if you don't check this box right here and your buyer's in default, really their only risk is earnest money. If you check this box right here and then your buyer doesn't close, the seller can sue for all sorts of damages that are outlined. Seller may cover additional damages as proper. So maybe they were going to buy a house and they lost their earnest money. They could, sue for that. Maybe they put stuff into storage. Who knows? So if you check specific performance, let your buyer know it's not just the earnest money. They can get hit with a lot more. Now, with the seller, they're automatically in specific performance. If they don't want to sell, you can sue them to sell. And that's what it says right here. Buyer can also push to get damages and other things collected as well. Now, court sounds fun, right? Especially when we're like, well, I'm right. And if you look at the contract, it says prevailing party, all reasonable costs and expenses, including attorney's fees, will be rewarded, right? Not necessarily. Judges can overrule this and not necessarily give you your attorney fees. So you might think, F that guy, I'm going to sue him, and I'm going to get my money out. And yeah, I'll get my attorney fees covered. You may get some of your money, and you may get some of your attorney fees, but there's no guarantee there. So be careful when you think just going to court. It's not the best place to go. There's only, buyers and sellers don't win in court, and neither do we. The attorney wins. That's it, guys. Keep that in mind. Before we ever go to court, we are going to try to go to mediation first. This talks about what the mediation process looks like. If we have an earnest money dispute, this is how it gets handled. It's all defined. There are rights to terminate, and they're in here, and it specifies what that looks like. As long as you do it on or before specific dates and deadlines, you can do it. If you're going to do any modification to this agreement, 26 is saying it must be done in writing. Also, this contract does not die at the time of closing. So you guys got to keep in mind, this contract, it starts at 18 pages. It just gets longer, right? The inspection resolution, that's another page to the contract. Every amendment you do is another page to the contract. All those pieces survive after closing. So let's just say that the entire inspection resolution wasn't complete prior to closing. It still exists after closing. This right here talks about how we can deliver notice. The one thing I'll say here is do not put text. If you put text and they text you something, you are responsible for taking the information that way. Or another one I see frequently is this, internet. What does that mean? Does that mean they can Facebook me? They can slide into my DMs and send me some document? I only go with fax and email for electronic notice, so I leave this blank. That's up to you. Choice of law would be Colorado if we ever have any issues. And then if you look at here, notice of acceptance and counterparts, we expire if we don't get notice that they've accepted it. Lastly, we're going to move forward in good faith to get to the finish line. If you want any additional provisions, that's where that would go. And going down to here, you put your buyer's information, seller information, make sure you have that in there as well. Say that you do or you do not have earnest money check. I never do. You'll say that you're the buyer's agent and you're getting paid by the listing brokerage firm. The only other note I want to make on this entire thing is this one thing here where it talks about what's called a status change. Okay, it says, let's just say that I was the listing agent. My buyer wants to buy my listing. I'd have to become a transaction broker, right? You used to be able to change it right here in the contract. You cannot anymore. You'll do it here. You'll say, yeah, I'm moving this. This is a status change. There's also a status change form that you'll need to complete as well. So that's all I've got on the contract, guys. Does anyone have any questions that I can answer for you? Sorry, I went a few minutes over. No?
Hey, Will, you've got there are several trainers who have great provisions. Is there a possibility we can get a provisions class? You go over them really well, and sometimes I try to take photos because I've had your classes before, and they're really great provisions that aid, especially when you're by yourself and you're writing a contract at night.
I can tell you guys this though. You guys already have all the provisions. They're all in here. These are DCOX. I did not write these. Right? You want an escalation clause? There you go.
There are other agents like yourself who've had some that are your own.
Sure. I'm happy to. I can tell you this. Julie, I'm not competent to teach that class. Just so you guys know, I'd love to. The problem is provisions, we need to be very careful when we write them. We're not attorneys. The standard additional provisions that I use in my buyer agency have been looked at by an attorney and approved. So I don't write provisions usually. I usually actually copy other ones, or any provision that I have in here, I've had an attorney look at it. So with that in mind, I feel good writing them, but I'm not technically competent. There's a guy named John Goodman. He's with the Franscona law firm, and he does teach a class on writing the best additional provisions ever. I would say take that, guys. At the end of the day, since I'm not an attorney, I don't feel legally competent to teach that class. Okay. So, I wish I could, and I'll give you advice, but I just don't want to be I don't want you to be in court and be well, Will Story told me this, because that ain't going to do a whole lot for you. You're going to want an attorney behind you for that, Julie.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Well, you guys have a great day. I'll put the recording up later. If you need anything, reach out to me on Facebook. If you don't have my cell phone, if you have that, you can call me. Call the broker hotline on Saturdays and Sundays. You'll get me. And you guys learn the contract. Read it from time to time. That's how you learn it. Talk to y'all later. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Will.
Thank you, Will.
Thank you.